Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Please use DJ at ArtistFirst.com. And now here they are. It's Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, Z-Man. I am Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And welcome to the show, this is starting out badly already. Welcome to the Soul of the Everyman, where the points don't matter.
Okay.
And tonight we're talking about one of our favorite people, Eeyore, otherwise known as Friedrich Nietzsche.
Eeyore,
was kind of clinically depressed as a life choice.
Oh my. He needs his tail put back on, dear.
He needs his tail put back on. But yeah, Nietzsche was like, he was a Debbie Downer. No fun at parties. So, but we do like Nietzsche, and tonight we're going to talk about one of his more famous aphorisms, and I think it's going to be for long-time listeners of the show. We know where you are. We know where you live. For long-time listeners of the show, it might sound a little odd for us, but Nietzsche's aphorism is "God is dead," and it was kind of seized upon. Certainly, in his era, was seized upon by the people who were known then as the modernists, and they were sort of the precursor of this kind of idea of this enlightened intelligentsia, and they were looking at anyone who held the worldview, which was prevalent at the time, of believing in God, believing in an afterlife, believing, in somehow the meaning of the preciousness and the significance of human life. Of course, Nietzsche was all about, everything is horrible all the time. So he was, at least initially attracted to this modernist movement. But then, I think he found it to be somewhat shallow and somewhat, somewhat self-referent and self-absorbed. And, that continues to this day with the same sort of ilk of people. But Nietzsche's famous aphorism, they seized upon it. They thought, this is wonderful. He's saying what we think. This God is dead. Of course, that's what we all think. And the interesting thing about this, and that we're going to go into a little bit tonight, is that Nietzsche's meaning was really misconstrued from the very beginning.
Right.
And that the fairer way to say his quote would be that truth is dead, is what he was trying to refer to, and that, in essence, the absolutes that people were trying to walk away from they're sort of akin, Margaret, to somebody who's cutting off their nose to spite their own face. You're literally declaring something which invalidates not only your position but your existence.
Well, they don't want to think of it that way. They just want to take the phrase "God is dead," and that means for them that they can do or say anything they want. In other words, there's no guiding force or foundation, because they become their own foundation. They get to choose what their reality is. That's really what the reason why that was grabbed. And then, like anything, when you take a phrase out of context without reading what the entire thing is, you can make it say anything.
And it was so pithy and so much sort of, it had that kind of feel of radical, sort of shocking, attention-grabbing kind of thing that often appeals to these type of people, because they want to seem very, very hip, very happening, very ahead of the crowd and all that stuff. Because it satisfies what we're going to talk about a little bit, which is their ego. But the whole idea, though, and maybe you can go in a little bit to the the underlying thought that Nietzsche was trying to express through this. I think he did it on purpose too, but it was sort of a shocking aphorism.
Right. He was calling attention to the fact that the way people were believing or the way they were following through with things was very much a construct by man's mind. We're going to analyze this a certain way, or we're going to follow this a certain way. It's dictated. And God becomes an object as opposed to being something divine or a real being that you would have an interaction with. It was rendered down to a thing, and this thing has got to be thought of a certain way, worshipped a certain way, or, you can only approach God a certain way, like you approach a king or an emperor. They're only...
And to be clear, what he's talking about is people who were professing a belief in God.
Right.
So in essence, he was looking at those who were. Maybe it's a nice time to introduce the whited sepulchre reference in essence, because they were like the Pharisees. They were giving a lot of lip service to God.
Right, and as far as they were concerned, they were meeting all the requirements, so therefore they're good. And those requirements were given so that they can break out of the old slavery mindset when they were in Egypt, because they were still thinking like slaves and not thinking as free men or individuals that are capable of taking steps into creating a whole new world. A slavery mindset does not allow you to create a whole new world,
nor to have a relationship with your source.
Right.
It puts you into and unfortunately this exists in other religions today. It puts you into a master-slave relationship with your God, in the sense of truly being an inferior to this being, and that not only dependent upon his graces, like you said, a king, but your life being forfeited at any time. It's much more of an Old Testament looking God than it is and they were kind of bringing that back. This is way past the Old Testament. This is well into the modernist movement, and they were looking to recreate the slavery mindset.
Well, to set the way you're supposed to look at this, the way you're supposed to run your life. You give someone an opportunity to decide the way you should be living, the dictates, and people will take it with both hands and run with it.
What you mean is, in essence, the rules were being exploited to provide a hierarchy where you would enslave the believers, in essence. You're
not allowed to have your own thoughts. You're not allowed to have anything outside of the accepted norm according to the method you're speaking of, like the postmodernists. They approach things a very you can look at it in a scientific way, and if it didn't fit all the ways that they looked at it, this logical, well, you do it this way, and when someone really is doing this not because they have a true conviction of the soul or the spirit, but they want to just say, I'm smarter than you.
It becomes dogma.
Right. And
rigidity.
And they basically belittle whoever is speaking, whether it is their statements of, instead of examining the thought or the concept that's being presented, they belittle it and mean, oh no, you don't know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Or, oh, you're still thinking the old way. You have to think the new way. And you're looking at this going, okay, that means that there is no flexibility in your mind. You've accepted that this particular way has got to be the only way.
Hmm. Well, and also you can think of it as in their value systems. In other words, somebody would come up with a thought, original idea, and they'd say immediately, oh, well, they didn't go to Harvard. They don't have a PhD. How could they possibly know anything?
How could they possibly know anything?
Or it's the same sort of thing where it's an elitist and exclusionary, rather than examining thoughts on their face or examining, giving any source the power to have a novel insight. Oh no, it's like people who, when you tell them all about where you went and you describe it in great glowing terms, they say, oh well, you say, oh, I went to a $10,000 a night hotel, and without any other description, that's enough, because their value system is, well, that must be so incredibly gorgeous and beautiful. And it's this same sort of dogmatic, inflexible rigidity that the postmodernists, in their enlightenment, were trying to force. And Nietzsche saw this coming too, in one regard. And he was sort of an iconoclast. He was not, despite being, as well as being, Eeyore's cousin, he was, misanthrope, iconoclast. He was good. He was good at all that stuff. Yeah, he was.
No, he was arguing this scientism, where you have to run it a certain way. But what I find fascinating is that if you really are having a conversation where there's different viewpoints are being presented, everyone's screaming about equality and inclusivity. You look at this and you go, you've got to be able to do this in your mind. You must be able to have the flexibility of mind to be able to see what the other's viewpoint may be in the presentation, and to include all thoughts. And that's the freedom that we were given. That's the freedom that we are to have here, especially in the United States. You're supposed to be allowed to have your own opinions about anything.
But it stems from our basic human freedom, and this is what to go back to Nietzsche, because we don't want to stray too far from our depressed friend. God is dead to him had nothing to do with God. It had everything to do with man, in essence, putting themselves not even in place of God, but in judgment of God. In essence, putting themselves in the I guess enviable position of being able to tell other people what God was.
Right.
And not even to be God to them, but just to tell them, well, you don't even know what God is. Let me tell you what God is.
Pretty much. It's the board is wiped clean, and they are the ones that want to grab the marker and just start filling it all in with what they feel. This has got to be the way it's got to be. And you look at this and you're like, okay, you're not sharing.
Well, and the board wiped clean is what the postmodernists always want. They always want history to have begun with their birth.
With their birth, right. There's nothing before.
All things before are suspect, and were created by ignorant boobs, who had no connection to the actual knowledge of today. And so, everything, we wipe the slate clean and start anew. And with it broom 100,000 years of human history and natural law and that which not only typifies but it characterizes the human being and they wish to start with this tabula rasa, but it's not. They're basically starting with their own little tablet, and they get to scribble on it. No one else gets to look, and whatever they put down is right.
Well, yeah, they really are in their own little world.
Yes, very much so.
But and they want to impose it on everything else. So it's
and the power to do that. Yes,
but it's understanding that when you get rid of the concept of God or the being of God, then your the world becomes really almost weightless. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. To understand that there is something outside of all the conceptions that you may come up with. There is an underlying truth. And if you cannot accept that your own mind cannot perceive the whole truth of what is actually going on around you, then you give a lot of credence to what you're thinking and what you're saying. That's the only thing that really exists for you. And, oh, gee, I never saw that coming. Or you're not taking into account the fact that you don't control the situations.
Well, and weightlessness is a wonderful term. I think Nietzsche used it as well. And it's not used in the way people think of it. It doesn't mean that you weigh nothing. It means that nothing has any weight. It's a form of meaninglessness. And it's actually an abrogation of reality. And it actually removes truth, but it also removes falsehood. You end up in essence a form of nihilism and a form of non-existence. And then the postmodernists were like, well, that's fine, because we're gonna tell you what existence is, And that's a wonderful conceit.
Let me tell you what existence is.
Isn't that a lovely little self-conceit there?
Well, you see that in small children, though. I mean,
oh yes, absolutely.
They do that all the time, and it's expected out of children. They're learning, and hopefully they're taught how to adapt to when things that they thought were true were not true. You have to be trained to that. If you find out you were wrong, you can say, well, gee, I was wrong with that. And then find out where you went wrong. That's vitally important. But to basically say, can't even admit that you're wrong, and you basically are trying to, how do I say this, find a way to save face. Maybe that's the best way to put it, because a lot of people believe that when you're wrong, you lose face.
Well, and that's if you bring it back to Tolle, that's the ego. The ego never wants to be wrong, because the ego feels wounded and diminished whenever anything goes against it, or anything doesn't go its way, anything kind of cracks through the conceit that it's in control and that the world, the reality bows down to it. Anything that cracks through that, the ego feels diminished, and then it reacts with anger or with the idea of sort of plaintive victimhood, where people will, oh, you have to help me, oh, I'm just, so there's those two things, but it's all about that, idea that if you're wrong, somehow you're diminished.
Well, I think that goes back to the belief that there is no God, or God is dead, because you're not answering to something higher. You're basically relying on somebody else to give you what you think you need. And not even looking within yourself to take the step upward and outward. You're like, oh, no, I know how this is. You have to give that to me because I don't have it.
Well, and if you think of it, we'll abstract it one more click further, is the ego is looking to reality with the supposition that reality must bend because that I deserve this. If it doesn't come to me, it must. I must just let reality know that it's not working out the way it was supposed to, and that it should then therefore change and bend to my will. And that is right in itself. That's the crux of God is dead, because there is no absolute reality. There's no overarching consciousness. Even your consciousness itself, which is always aware of reality to the extent that it can be, is being muffled by this ego.
Right. There is only the ego. There's nothing greater than my ego.
Right.
And to be really aware of that, because most people don't believe that actually can happen. The idea that I have to say something about this, or I have to have an opinion about this, or I've got to give a reaction to this, is your ego trying to assert itself always to be in control of the floor. Your consciousness can observe this and see that the ego, it's like someone who doesn't want to get off the stage. You need the giant hook.
And in some ways, it also ties back to our story about the Japanese monk and the is that so? Because the ego and the God is dead portion of it is that I have, I come into you and I say, you have done this, you owe me this, you must do this. I am, you're convicted. Your reality, whatever reality you have, means nothing. The reality that I have means everything. It's really not only just an absolute relativism. It's everything is relative to me, and I am always right. But what pierces it, the reply, which is so beautiful, is that so? And it's beautiful because Nietzsche's reply, in essence, to the postmodernist and to the modernists of his day, was that when you say God is dead, I say you're saying truth is dead. Well, that's the is that so is dead. So the is that so is that truth?
Right.
You come to me with all this ego flame and drama. What was the thing we just so that I can, you smell like drama and a headache. It was a shirt that said you smell like drama and a headache. Please go away. Please go away. Which I thought was great, because that sort of encapsulates in another way the same thing we're saying here, is that when this comes into you, when people come screaming up to you and saying God is dead, or that I am God, or I'll tell you what God is, because my ego is all. And the is that so is you smell like drama and a headache. Yeah. And yes, okay, just you stand over there and foam at the mouth, and the rest of us are going to go on with reality, and knowing that consciousness does exist, and that your ability to contain and as Margaret just said a little earlier, within your mind understand that the ego and the emotions and the other parts of you which want to deny reality have a place, but they can't be allowed to run the place.
Well, that's allowing the 4-year-olds to run the school.
Or the inmates to run the asylum.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes. One flew over the cuckoo's nest, But yes, Nietzsche's plosive, this aphorism which says God is dead, is really, is that so? In an inside out way, because that was Nietzsche's way. In essence, looking directly into the eyes of these people who he could see were consumed with their own ego, consumed with their own their own navel-gazing, introspective, insular philosophy, and say God is dead. And they were like, oh, yeah, God is dead, God is dead. And he's like, he just stood back and he goes, they don't even get that, do you?
No. Well, it's again, religion itself, all the different religions have people who do this.
Absolutely. In fact, religio, is all about the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And the rules are a way of killing God. They're a way of, please be, don't write Scott with all these. Every religion has a kernel of truth. And through them, through following their philosophies with the eyes of the heart, you can arrive at enlightenment. You can of your absolute consciousness, your alignment with Source, with God. But every one of them has, as Margaret just said, so many rules and so many people who would love to use those to tell you who God is and what He is, and you can come to me and I'll tell you all about what God wants you to do, and don't worry about it. It's God. God told me to tell you that this kind of stuff is all those rules. It's pharisaical.
Yes. It's if one can accept that these religions each have a piece of truth. Mm. And God is way bigger than any concept a man comes up with.
Or any revelation even, because we just can't contain.
Right.
We can't contain God. We are a living incarnation of the living God. We are.
Your mind, your thought process, your rational side cannot contain it.
Right. You can be it. You can't think it, if that makes sense. You can be a being which is in alignment with God,
right? And
through your heart feel the absolute connection to eternity, but your mind can't wrap its little arms around it, and so therefore says, that's not real. God's dead. And you say, is that so?
Right. You can't prove it. It's
there you go. Say that again.
What?
You can't prove it.
Yeah, you can't prove it.
That's the postmodernist right there. And show me where God is.
That proof is really the foundation of a lot of what the control issues are. People want to dictate certain things, certain rules, and they say, okay, well then it's true. If you meet these criteria, then it's true for me. And you're like, okay, that is the process that most of us go through. You just try to teach a 2-year-old to eat. It's like it tastes good or it doesn't. You can't tell me this is good for me. It doesn't taste good.
Well, but what you said earlier is even better. The mind devises systems for evaluating something's truth. But if what you're bringing to the mind doesn't fall within those systems, I can't measure it. It doesn't make any of this. It doesn't do that. It doesn't have any properties. Therefore, it doesn't exist.
Right. That's what they want to say.
To the mind, it does not exist because the mind has drawn a box around what it thinks that can exist, and anything that doesn't fall inside the box has no existence. So God is to
the ego.
Well, exactly, but it's a form of elitism. It's a form of exclusion. It's saying that reality is in my box, and within my box, things must be able to be measured and perceived, and this and that, and all these things have to be met. And if they don't meet any of those things, it's not real. It doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. And yet we're as close as we can inside the scientific box. It's almost cracked through because we have dark matter and dark energy, and it's driving them crazy because we can't see it. But we know it's there.
Right.
And we're like, yeah, meet me on the other side of the philosophy table. You're right. We should take a break, shouldn't we?
I think we've reached the halfway point.
We have reached the halfway point. So, Nietzsche, we'll leave you with Nietzsche's wonderful phrase. You can ponder it over the break. And on the other side, we'll continue to talk about the conceit.
Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
Moonstones and Murder. Real murderers need a heart of stone. Meet Maggie and Mike Heartstone, parents of twin boys, entrepreneurs, and now empty nesters. Mike is retired, not by choice, from his position as chief of police in the picturesque resort town of Hamilton. And now his wife Maggie and her shop, the Cozy Crystal, are their only source of income. When a mysterious killing interrupts Hamilton's famous Springfield Park rock show, the townsfolk, the Cozy Crystal, and their lives are rocked to the core. Can Mike and Maggie figure out who is behind the murderous deeds before the town comes crashing down around them? A touch of romance, a little mayhem, and a whole lot of suspense, along with plenty of comedy and thrills galore. Get your crystal magnifying glass out. It's time for some Moonstones and Murder. Available on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, and other fine e-tailers in ebook and paperback. Out soon on Audible. Get your copy today.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lyons is book 1 of the adventures of Devkalion, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Brag Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Hi, this is William B. Davis, the actor who plays the Smoking Man, or did play the Smoking Man on The X-Files. I'm also a writer, director, producer, and I am delighted to tell you that you are listening to the ArtistFirst radio network.
Thanks for joining us, everyone, on The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. And we are back.
Mm-hmm.
And we are talking about our bestie, Friedrich Nietzsche, who's, he's just fun at parties. But tonight's tonight's talk, we've been talking a little bit about his famous, or one of his more famous quotes, which is, he said, "God is dead." But I think, as we mentioned in the previous half hour, it was seized upon and misconstrued, and to this day, I believe, is seized upon and misconstrued.
Misunderstood. Yeah. I saw, as we were doing some research on this, they have T-shirts that say, "God is dead," and then Nietzsche, and then underneath it is Nietzsche is dead, and they put God. And it's like...
I like that.
But, it's a complete misunderstanding.
But I still like that. That's great. Nietzsche's dead. God. I win.
He wasn't arguing the point.
No, he wasn't. But that's still very clever, though. But
I'm sure it sold a few T-shirts.
I'm sure it sold a few T-shirts. But as we mentioned in the previous half hour, the statement in and of itself was Nietzsche's reply to the modernists, who were trying to not just put themselves in the place of God, but to put their elitism into the position where it could tell others what God was, and in essence construct and deconstruct God on their own terms.
Right.
And this sort of vein of elitism, runs through humanity, and you see it through all. We mentioned the Pharisees, the Pharisaical text, the revelation that was given. If we go back into the Old Testament, the revelation that was given to Moses, the law, was to give the Exodus, recently unenslaved Israelites a new way of reconnecting to their God, because they had been living, in essence, for generations under the rule of others. So they had acquired a slave mentality, and by that I mean is they no longer had to think for themselves. All their thinking was done for them. They no longer had to say, "Well, what will I do today?" No. We'll tell you what you have to do. Where will I get something to eat? Don't worry, we'll give you all the. So their minds were imprisoned, and their ability to relate to their foundational selves, to their Abrahamic roots, to their Adamic, back to Adam and Eve roots of relationship with their God, with their source, had been severely impaired. So Moses was in essence a call back. It was like a revival. It was like, I'm going to revive the religion in the people. I'm going to revive their relationship with God. I have to bring them out of slavery. First of all, you have to unenslave the body,
right,
and then unenslave the mind.
Right, and God basically was calling his people back.
So
he used Moses to light a fire, get them to realize that they are in slavery, and he has heard their cries.
Mm-hmm.
And Moses was chosen to do this, and he wasn't too happy about it either,
But he brings them the law.
Yes.
And in the Torah you have the law. But the law is 10 commandments, relatively simple, and the very first couple of them are really the most important ones. Thou shalt put the Lord thy God above all other gods, and blah blah blah. It goes on, but I don't want to quote them all. What I'm trying to say is that relationship was putting the Israelites into fealty with God and renewing the contract, renewing the covenant, right? The problem with that is that over the next very short period of time, those 10 went to about 610. Because why? Because the elites, the God is dead folks, in essence, said, oh, no, you don't know how to do God. Let me tell you how to do God.
I will tell you how to do God.
I'll tell you how to do God. Well, no, this is wonderful, but we have to, keep holy the Sabbath day. Well, we have to figure out how to do that. Can't just let anybody keep holy the Sabbath. We got to tell you how to do that. Well, they were killing God. What they were doing was putting themselves in the place of the ego. The ego wants to have a purpose, and its purpose is to tell other people what to do. Where do bad ideas come from, Margaret? Bad ideas come from other people. That's where bad ideas come
right.
from.
And, well, the thing is, first of all, Moses had them for 40 years in the desert. Can you imagine being in charge of
70 or 80,000 unhappy Israelites in the desert?
However the number was. Some people say millions, okay?
A lot.
Unhappy Jews in the desert.
Unhappy, yes.
Okay, and he has said this is a stiff-necked people.
Stiff-necked people.
And he said that to God. Okay, so he had them for 40 years in the desert.
Right.
And he got tired.
He got
a little tired, and he was told by God that he had to choose men from the different tribes.
Tribes, yes.
To alleviate the amount of work that Moses was doing. He was being judged for a lot of the problems that were rising up, and he had to choose or decide, make a judgment on what the problem may have been. So this is where, one man can't do it. You're going to need other people. And the hierarchy begins. But they were supposed to adhere to God in terms of understanding that their connection to God is the thing that mattered. And what did they do? Of course, they're like, oh, we can't look on you, Moses, when you came down off the mountain. Your face is shining so brightly. They actually put like a veil or something over his face because originally God wanted to talk to all of them, and they all ran away screaming, saying, "No, talk to Moses."
Well, but in essence, the hierarchy and the rules, the sort of outgrowth of a new form of strictures upon the relationship. The relationship Moses had, you just said it, was direct to God. Moses went up onto the mountain, and he was directly in contact with Source. So if we put it in different terms, Moses knew his consciousness was one with the all. He was an enlightened being. It transformed his outer appearance to the point where people couldn't look upon him as though he were also a god. But then they said, well, we can't be Moses, but we can write all the rules and make sure that everyone understands that we're like best friends to Moses. And then, if we're best friends, then we can say what Moses would have said. And they put on top of it the ego, rather than understand that the relationship could be anyone's.
Right. And God let them. Okay.
Well, free will.
Yes, but he was going to interact with them individually.
Yes.
All right, and they chose not to because they were too afraid.
Right. So what were they doing? The Israelites back then, way before Nietzsche, they were killing God. In some ways, by putting themselves in place. The wonderful, and this is earlier on, of course, but the wonderful legend of the golden calf was another way of killing God. In essence, even moments after they got the law, they went right back to nonsense.
Well, okay, it was before Moses came down.
I thought there were two tablets, Ma. He had them. He went back up. He came back down, and then he had to break them at that time and then get another set.
Yeah, but when he went up to get the other set, they didn't transgress again.
That's true. Yeah, it was the first transgression. Yeah,
it was before he actually came down. They thought, oh well, he can't be alive anymore. He's up there for a month.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, but yes,
But what I'm saying is that because they chose not to turn to God directly, they wanted to have someone in the in-between. And that is the problem.
Yeah, the intermediary.
When you're choosing an intermediary, you're not having a direct relationship with the other, which is exactly where you are to be. And when you realize that when you choose the intermediary, there is a part of you that will gladly step forward that way, and that's your ego.
Yes.
Because your ego wants to be able to dictate the way the information from God comes in.
Mm-hmm. A filter.
Yes, and that's not. It takes courage to be able to be free enough, choose to have an unfiltered connection with God.
A lot of courage.
So, and I believe God understood that this was his problem with the Israelites, so he allowed this, because Moses was going to do it, but that basically caused a lot of problems for Moses, because he can't be everywhere at one time. He isn't God.
Well, that's interesting, though. So what the law was also an intermediary.
Yes.
And in essence, giving them the law, giving us the law, was a way of putting a set of rules, a set of gates or doors that would be your intermediary. Well, I haven't done the three things that I was supposed to do, and I haven't done this, haven't done that. Well, I can't. My relationship with God is now impaired. Of course, it's not, but that's the ego. The ego saying, well, you haven't checked off all the boxes.
Right.
So therefore, you can't have a relationship with God, and I'll tell you when you can. Just keep working at it.
The thought occurs to me that when you look at this situation, they basically were thinking that, I can't talk to God. Mostly, I believe that direct connection with God, the fear arises because they understood that they are unclean, and God's presence can only have the purity around them. So you're going to die. So they're thinking, okay, if Moses is the best we've got, we'll take it through him. But it is the misunderstanding of the difference between power and control. Most people believe that it's the same thing. If you have control, then you must have the power. Or if you have power, then you must have the control. And they're two different things, concepts. The power that is, how do I say this? Internal power is inherent. It is life itself, right? And control has to do with your ability to quote unquote, make something happen, all right? And when you are in a situation, you may be able to discern whether something is going to go a certain way or not. Or if I do this, then this happens. And people believe that you're controlling something when if I do this, then this happens. This is the idea of the scientific method. Is it a repeatable experiment? Am I going to get the same thing? If I do this, will I get the same result? But people misunderstand that. They believe that doing this, they are a direct cause for the result. In other words, they believe if they push the button to the elevator, they're the ones that are making the elevator move.
Very true. Yeah. Right, exactly.
And it has nothing to do with that. It is the mechanism and the power that allows all that to, okay, push the button and you go to the 5th floor. But man's mind has a tendency to believe that, well, I pushed the 5th floor button. Look how marvelous I am. I did that. Well, yeah, you pushed the button, but you didn't get everything up to the 5th floor. So this is where the misunderstanding between power and control is.
Right, and the ego wants to talk to you about the control you have.
Right.
And it wants to tell you that if you're not in control, that you got to, that others have to make it so that you're in control again, or that the world has to bend to you. But power, as you mentioned, is inherent. It's life itself. Consciousness has power. And without the relationship, the God as source and consciousness as a incarnate portion of source, that realization and that connection is power. Mm-hmm. Control is all the ego filters on top of it. You're saying, well, you can't do that, you can't do that. Only until you do these 3 things and wash 3 times and have this, this sacrifice and that burnt offering and then you can have a relationship.
Then you can push the button.
Then you can push the button.
Push the button
and
to
the elevator
penthouse.
will come. Right, to the penthouse, exactly.
Okay. And that's the way a lot of people think. It's a very superficial...
rules-based.
Rules-based according to the superficial, not understanding the whole existence of your universe is not of your doing.
And this is a good thing to say, that the true depth of the scientific method is a willingness to say, I don't understand. And you're doing that. That's at the heart level. That's at the consciousness level. I don't understand this. And I'm willing to try to understand it. The people who believe it's scientism, that they're pushing the button and making the lights go on, that they now understand how this works. Push the button, lights come on.
Well, they control the light.
They control the light.
Now I control the light. It's like, no.
But the true depths of the connection to source says the phenomenon. We know how to evoke this particular phenomenon, but do we understand it to the depths of it? Actually, what is going on there? A lot, but not entirely, because we just don't have those. We just
say no.
No. And that to be able to be comfortable with that lack. To be comfortable with it is to say that I understand that source and I are connected, but I don't need to see the mechanism that it's connected by. I don't need to have the 50 things that I do to get to connection.
Right.
The Buddha and enlightenment, and people say, well, what are the 7 steps? What are the 14 things? The other stuff that we have to do? And he's like, okay, try that, do that. None of that matters, but to the religio, to the religions, it's all about those rules. It's all about the steps. It's all about the 7 paths and the 15 mudras and who knows what else. It doesn't matter. Those are all, pharisaical.
Well, it's only surface. It's like you're getting into the elevator, using that analogy again.
Yeah.
You have to be able to step in the elevator and step back, and so that all these other people can come in, and then make sure your hands are nice and clean so you can push the button squarely.
Right.
And make sure when the doors close, you're not in the way. I mean, observable, logical. You can deduct certain things from that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we do in general when we interact with our universe. It is observation and deduction and learning. You may not understand the mechanism just yet, but it doesn't mean that one day you might understand it. But to be open enough to say, okay, well, I do it this way. I push this button and then this happens. Okay, that's exactly it. That's as simple as that. You were not in the one causing this.
Well, and here's a great example. When you push the button and it doesn't happen, the ego gets mad. You push the button, and the elevator doesn't come.
Right.
And the ego's like, I pushed the button. I did all the things. Because you really didn't understand.
Right.
You really don't understand how it got there or how you're getting there.
Right.
But the ego has lied to you and said, yeah, you've done everything. So it should come. And it doesn't.
Right. And?
It came.
Yes. I believe we've reached the end of our show.
God is not dead.
God is not dead.
And I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. And thank you for listening.